Well, welcome everybody to our first official webinar of 2025. We're all very much looking forward to 2025. I hope you are too. Today's webinar is Emerging Threats for 2025 and what you need to know. And to perform this wonderful webinar is going to be Jake Grandlenard. Sorry, Jake. He's our managing consultant at PKI Solutions. Jake, if you've ever had any experience with him, he's a wealth of knowledge. He's been doing this for about 20 years. He knows pretty much everything there is to know about PKI, and he's very much willing to provide information to organizations such as those that are listening in on this webinar. So what we're going to be doing today, or Jake's going to be doing today, is talking about some of the threats that we have been seeing over the last year that are going to be important for the 2025. And because, you think about those pesky hackers, there are a lot of them out there, and they're finding very creative ways of getting through the security measures that organizations are putting up. So since we have so many customers that are PKI customers, that's all we do is PKI. So expect that. We've found lots of different ways that the hackers are coming in, and we're finding ways to make sure that they can't get through. So I'm going to turn this over to Jake and have him talk a little bit more about that. So Jake, take it away, and I'll come in color commentary if necessary. So go for it.
Excellent. So anyone who might have been disappointed for not seeing Mark, I'm filling in for Mark. But I took a little bit of liberty here in the agenda and bringing in some things. So some of the things that we have on here lead to making it easy for bad actors, and some of the things I've wanted to touch on are also around what's going to cause people's PKIs to break, which is a risk in and of itself, not only to the environments, but to probably anyone watching this job. For the agenda today, we're going to touch on strong certificate mapping, which is thrust itself back into the spotlight. I want to make sure it's in the spotlight for everyone on the calls, and we'll explain why. And then avoiding configuration drift. So these are things that are currently coming up right now with clients. We've been doing this long enough now that I'm starting to see repeat customers, and we built it correct the first time, and it has since drifted. And we'll talk about what that drift is and how we can look at that. And then also there's been some big releases recently around post-quantum and post-quantum readiness. So we'll touch on those and how that impacts us now and what we need to do. And then we'll do a summary and we'll wrap it up. So without that, we'll pop right into the strong certificate mapping. So back in May of 2022, Microsoft released an update. And in that update, the goal was to essentially thwart credential escalation, where someone can take a certificate, enroll for that certificate, and it might say Jake Grandlenard is the subject, but down in the SAN or in another area, I might put Brad's name or anyone else I want it to be for that day. And then we can then use that certificate to basically escalate our credentials in an environment and get to a place where we are very dangerous quickly. So Microsoft put out this update and this fix for this strong certificate mapping. And really what it comes down to is it places it, added a new attribute in our certificates, a new extension, and it's an OID. But what it gets populated with is the SID from either the machine or the user account. And jump forward a couple of years. Let me go back for a second. It's a great idea. It works in perfect scenarios, but what happens is it only happens that the process only works correctly when someone enrolls for a certificate from a domain joined workstation from that is using a certificate template where we get that information from Active Directory because we trust that. But so many of the certificates we issue today via Intune and Jamp and you name it, all the other MDMs, our certificate templates are configured to supply the subject in the certificate, which does not meet the requirement to add that SID into our certificates, thus not meeting our certificate mapping. So now we jump forward. For a long time, Microsoft didn't have a great answer about this, and they just kind of kept kicking the can down the road. And this is where my nervousness for our clients in the industry as a whole comes in. Well, it's been kicked down the road for so long that I think it's kind of fallen to the back burner. And so Microsoft did come up with a plan for Intune, and some other vendors are working on it as well. But I don't think it's been really put out to the industry the way it could have been or should have been. In that, hey, they've now set February 11th as the date that they're going to start enforcing this. So it's racing up on us quickly. And if you don't have the fix in for Intune to start adding this this new URI, which is essentially adding the SID into their certificates, then things are going to break for this date. So I have two dates up here: February 11th, 25, and September 10, 25. So we've been running in a mode or since all the way back in May of 22 that allowed us to keep going and essentially ignore that requirement. So they're going to flip it again on February 11th, and then we can once again, and this change would take place on our domain controllers. We will have to go in and say, we acknowledge that we're not meeting that requirement. We want to continue to use these certificates. However, come September 10th, they're going to remove the ability for us to have that setting in on our domain controller. And excuse me, if you're using those certificates for authentication, so let's say you're using an MDM that isn't able to do this, you haven't updated your Intune, you're still using certificates even in your internal PKI where users are inputting the name, and this could be not just we're not just thinking about user certificates. Kind of a fringe case is some certificates we issue have both server authentication and client authentication, and if we're using the client auth part of that, we need to comply with these rules. So this is kind of a big deal that that's coming back at us here, and we need to make sure that we get in front of this, or we're going to face some challenges with our certificates and how we're using them. So at the basis of this, the strong certificate mapping is a great thing. Anyone on the call that's been through a penetration test, this is pure gold for the penetration testers. It's the first thing they hit. It's low-hanging fruit for them. Similarly, what we do when we come into an environment working with clients and using Spotlight, we'll notify of templates that are misconfigured. And in our minds, misconfigured would be where essentially the most dangerous ones are we allow client authentication and supply and request, and we don't require a manager's approval to first inspect that certificate and make sure it's on the up and up before we issue it. So I wanted to bring this up today. It's loosely back to a vulnerability in that the credential escalation and whatnot. But my biggest concern is I'm worried that this isn't getting the attention it deserves out there, and people are going to be scrambling here soon. So we're well less than a month away from the initial change again, and the clients are going to start seeing this, and we're going to be scrambling and getting everything together. And so this is one of my big things right now. I'm working on with some of my other clients who have, like I said, some of those other mobile device managers, those MDMs that may not have that capability of getting that value into the certificate. So there are some things we can do to get around that. As far as manually putting things in certificates and this, but it just doesn't scale very well. So again, all of this goes back to our concern that this could be something that sneaks up on our people in the community, and we're not ready for it. So I've committed to several of my clients who I've worked with them long enough now, they're friends, that I'll be working on this. We'll be working on this, and then we'll be putting some information out on this as well to kind of get this front and center, so you have a place to go and look. There are resources out there from Microsoft if you search for certificate or strong certificate mapping, but I just don't feel like there's any great one place to go to get this information. So that's the first thing I wanted to touch on today, Brad.
There's a question about Intune and NDES with the misconfigured template. Can you maybe address that one? From Riva.
Oh, okay. I see Richard Hicks is also respond to it. Is there a Intune without misconfigured template? Yeah. So technically, no. To that question, Riva, and I deal with this a lot with pen testers. Is so many of the queries that we do against our templates and our CAs are very, very black and white. It's either misconfigured or it's not. Well, unfortunately, to facilitate Intune, to facilitate any of our MDMs, it has to be configured in such a way that we can't have a CA manager approving every single certificate which we issue through Intune. But what we can do is we can essentially permission that template as tightly as we can, and essentially limit down to the service count that is likely running your NDES instance. It needs the permissions. So we can't ever take it completely out of that misconfigured status, but it's something that we know about. It has to be that way, and we can get it, as tight as we can, but it has to be supply and request, and it has to be essentially automatically approved, just because of the sheer number of certificates that we're pumping out that way.
Okay. Moving on to the next one, we've got we're on a timeline here. That's the beauty of PKI. We could probably talk. You said you can talk about this for days. We don't.
Days. And so this next one is something that is near and dear to our heart, and because when you've done this for as long as we have, like I said, I'm in the process of visiting with clients a second time, even clients that we did a big rollout for and hadn't had contact with a whole lot. Now they're reaching back out, and it's been usually because of a failed penetration test or something like that. Whereas someone who didn't possibly realize the consequences of adding permissions to a certificate template, or what it could do, or simply unchecking that it's just a tick box in a certificate template that says a manager has to approve this, or they don't, and it automatically gets issued. So that can happen, and most of us in this industry know that even in the largest corporations, the PKI team usually isn't huge. So we don't always have a lot of people. So sometimes we don't always get to a best practice of really segmenting, for instance, the people that can update our templates versus the people that can run our CAs versus the people that can do other things. So this happens. And when this does happen, it can definitely cause problems for us. We hope it's a pen tester doing this, catching this. If not, then it's even worse. So what we want to be able to do is basically figure out when this stuff is changing, and Spotlight is able to do that, and we can do some other things manually to be checking our templates and making sure that the permissions haven't changed. But I had and we think about this in the context of a mistake, but I was working with a client. It's been a couple months ago, but um, they were dealing with a third-party vendor for a product used for simplifying their single sign-on. And we had worked together the day before, and the next day we're going through templates and rehashing things. And I'm like, what in the world happened overnight? Well, this vendor said we needed to add and grant essentially domain level or domain users or domain computers access to enroll for this template. And it simply was not the case. It's a mistake. And I'm not trying to single out any one vendor for this, but it's been my experience over my career. Vendors oftentimes are foremost concerned about getting their product working, and sometimes that's at the risk or at um, the risk of putting the client's PKI in danger. And again, they probably don't know PKI like we do, so they don't realize what they have just done. So what happens, ends up happening again. We have drift, and this might not have been some from the PKI team, or it could have been, but they're just following instructions from a vendor that says, "Hey, you have to do this. You have to grant, full access or all of this thing." And so that's another product that drift. If we don't have something to catch that, it stays in place, and you just hope it's something simple like you've issued a GOPS of certificates that weren't needed, but it can be much worse. So that's another time it can come into play. And then lastly, one of the things that I've kind of championed for a long time and trying to work on is when we build our PKIs, and again, back to my comment about how our teams usually aren't that large. A lot of times we have different groups coming in to manage our servers that are hosting our CAs. And they get placed in the local admin group on our servers hosting. So yeah, exactly. Teams of one. So when that happens, every single group we add in that local admins group of our CA, if we haven't updated the default security on our certificate authority, they are now CA admins, whether they know it or not. And there's a lot of things we can do with that. There's a lot of things we don't want them to do with that. So, our recommendation is always at a bare minimum. We like to see a dedicated group in there and remove the other. So it also has enterprise and domain admins, usually a lot more closely guarded than the local admin group on a server. So at a bare minimum, we like to see that the local server admins group is removed from an admin role on our CAs. And again, this is something that we're working on with for Spotlight to try to it'll notify us if these changes take place. So if someone has added to that local CA admins group or whatever. But so these are things that can expose us to risk, and it happens all the time. But the one takeaway from this, I would say, even if you have a team of one, like we talked about, it'd be great if you had a different group, or at the bare minimum, remove that local server admins from your CA admins role, and get that pared down as much as we can. All right. Here we go. All right. So here's another huge topic. And this could be this could be an all-day session. But what I wanted to touch on today is around. I'm starting to see clients really get invested in the post-quantum preparation. So we'll see a lot of the new acronyms that PQC and post-quantum cryptography. But what is happening now is I'm starting to see projects spin up where we are assessing entire PKIs and looking at all the certificates issued. So doing a lot of work, especially in big environments. So from from this, if you've done PKI for a long time, like we have, if anyone remembers when we were forced to migrate everything from the SHA-1 hashing to the SHA-2 hashing for our CAs, uh, it was um, it was a big change. There were a lot of applications for quite a while who really struggled with that. And if you remember back then, Microsoft was leading the charge. Well, especially if you're focused on ADCS, but they made the leap. And then if you heard, the backstory, they had to then go back and rebuild SHA-1 CAs to handle the applications that couldn't do the new, they couldn't do the new hashing algorithm, the SHA-2. So, it gives us some idea of what we're up against here or what's coming, but a fraction of this, because technically speaking, that was a very small change. Our machines already supported these other cryptographies and these different hashing. As we move and look to post quantum, it's just a different playing field. We're talking about much larger amounts of data being consumed as far as keys and everything else. And so as these projects spin up, and like I said, I'm seeing more and more of these. Getting down to the in certificate level, at times might be a little bit premature. I think it's great to go that far, but reading through a lot of this, and I'm trying to stay up with it as much as possible. I think what's going to end up happening is, crawl before we walk, and then walk before we run. We're trying to get as much done early as we can, and that's going to mean for a while, even when the post quantum things do become available to us, we're probably going to be running in a hybrid mode for a while, where we might have a PKI built that could do post quantum, but not all of our stuff is going to be able to do it. So what I've been telling my clients is let's look at more of a certificate use case level, and then start doing things like data classification. So when we start looking at this, I have clients where maybe all their data has equal importance, but others I've worked with in the past where trade secrets that escaped could ruin a business. And so if that happens, obviously that information is probably the most critical, and it would be one of the first we would want to target when we go into this hybrid and start to bring this in. Jumping ahead a little bit, but why it matters now is information that can be captured now, even if it's encrypted now. It could be decrypted later once this technology comes to the more to the masses. I keep hearing 10 years, even though the time keeps going forward, but it will happen. There'll come a time where, just like everything else, it will be more and more available. I have no idea how long that's going to be, but our biggest secrets, we want to know where that data is and protect it accordingly. So just because it's encrypted now and not readable by our adversaries doesn't mean it might not be readable in X number of years into the future. To the middle bullet point there, Microsoft had come out with a statement actually back in towards the end of 24, where they are basically committing to, within the next, I can't remember if they said couple or several months, of getting us the ability to update our PKIs and be able to start testing this. So it's within the realm of possibility within the year, because they said months, they didn't say years. We might have in our power to build a PQC PKI, post quantum ready PKI, that we can start testing our applications with. So that's a big deal out there. One of the biggest vendors that obviously, so we're so focused on this, but that I've seen that's coming out that's going to start making this available. The first to go through it were our HSMs, but not all of our clients use HSMs. All of them use ADCS in some form or fashion. So definitely, like I said, staying up with these changes, and trying to stay after it. And I see a lot of comments out there. There is a lot of information out there that's going on, and I just want to make sure that we're both staying up with the information that's being made available to us, but also I want to make sure that we are protecting ourselves against if someone comes to the door and tries to sell you a full-fledged solution. I would be wary because it's not there yet. Yeah. So yeah, a lot of really good comments I'm seeing over there. Yeah, this is a crazy time where a lot of the things that we use are not available to us right now. In the fact that the latest models of the HSMs have gotten their certifications, the big, I call them the big 2 or 3, Encipher, Talos, Entrust, Talos. They have met that with their new models. They're going to be post-quantum ready, and their SDKs available for testing and whatnot. But Microsoft's announcement within the last couple of months was a huge step forward for us, where we could actually maybe start implementing something that's tangible.
So moving on. Oh, summary, good.
So summary is, these are all threats to our PKI. Whether it's not like they have in the commercial when they're trying to sell you something, the guy in a hoodie, coming for us. But these are all things that can hurt our PKI. The strong certificate mapping, that one has I think the real possibility to really hurt a lot of our clients if we're not staying up with this. Definitely, we want to stay on top of that one. So the configuration drift, it's happening every single day. The biggest thing there is if you don't have a tool like Spotlight or something like that, be aware of what your settings are, because we can dump our settings there. There's certain util commands and there's other things where we can do this. Know what your settings are so we know when they've changed, and then that last one with the post quantum, it's evolving constantly, and just stay up with this. We'll be putting information out as it becomes available, and in what we're learning and actually doing. So please look to our website and our blogs, and we will be staying up with this and trying to share information with all of our clients and people in the community as well.
Yeah, I want to add that avoiding the configuration drift. If you've got lots of people within your organization that have access to your PKI and can make changes, and those people are kind of in a category where they're PKI aware but not really PKI fluent, you do run the risk of those changes that they make actually introducing the vulnerabilities in there. So I think the one solution we have, the PKI Spotlight, is designed specifically to catch those changes immediately after they're made and alert you to the fact that a change has been made that's opened you up to a vulnerability. So Jake, again, a wonderful presentation. PKI is something that is near and dear to our hearts, and I always say that there's a big difference between an operational PKI and a secure PKI. A lot of people can have a PKI that's running just fine, but it's actually not running secure. So do not be lulled into false sense of security that if everything's working and no one's complaining, your PKI is secure. Always make sure that it's got its security as your focus on that. And we're running out of time here, but I do want to announce the next webinar we're going to have. The next webinar is going to be held on February 20th. And it is right now PKI for banking and finance. So This doesn't necessarily mean that if you're not banking and finance, you shouldn't be attending, because I'm sure there's going to be some real nuggets that can be used for anybody that's outside of banking and finance. But right now, that's what's going to be. So again, thank you very much for attending this webinar. And if we didn't get a chance to answer all the questions, we'll see if we can answer them to the person that asked them. So thanks again for attending, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.